rain hits Seoul like a punishment. It comes down in sheets over the glass towers of Gangnam, turning the boulevard below into a river of broken light. Red, white, amber, all of it bleeding into the wet pavement. A black car idles at the curb in front of a luxury high-rise, its hazards blinking slowly, like a countdown. Grace Amara stands on the sidewalk. She does not move. Her coat is soaked through. Her hair, pinned back with the kind of precision that takes practice, has begun to collapse at the temples. Water runs down her face and she doesn't wipe it. The suitcase beside her is Louis Vuitton, a gift from the Han family 3 years ago, back when they still wanted her to feel like she belonged. And beside her, one small hand wrapped around 2 of her fingers, stands her son. Kofi is 6 years old. He's in his school blazer, navy blue with the gold Han family crest stitched at the breast pocket, and he is looking up at his mother with the quiet terror of a child who doesn't understand what's happening, but knows with every animal instinct he has that it is very bad. "Oma," he says, "are we going somewhere?" Grace looks down at him. She opens her mouth, closes it. The security guards posted at the entrance of the building stare straight ahead. Not at her, not at the boy, at nothing. They have been trained well. She exhales. "Yes," she says finally. "We're going somewhere." She doesn't know where yet, but she picks up the suitcase, takes her son's hand more firmly in hers, and walks to the edge of the curb. Behind her, the lights of the Han penthouse glow 42 floors up, warm, golden, untouched by the rain. She doesn't look back. She should have, but she doesn't. A voiceover cuts through the sound of rain. In a city where she never fully belonged, she lost everything in a language she learned just to survive. Flash cut, a different night, a different kind of cold, a sleek silver Mercedes pulling up to the estate, a Korean woman stepping out, mid-30s, striking, composed, dressed in cream. She holds the hand of a small boy. She doesn't look nervous. She looks like she's been here before. Then Han Seo-jun's voice clipped and final. "This is my son." Cut to black. Grace Amara was not born into luxury. She was built for it. She grew up in Lagos in a house that was orderly and intelligent. Her father an economist, her mother a linguist, both of them deeply certain that excellence was the only language the world respected. Manya, she was schooled in London, graduated top of her class from King's College, and by 25 had a career in international finance that made most people her age feel like they were running in slow motion. She was not the kind of woman who needed saving. She was the kind of woman people called when things needed fixing. That was how she met Han Seo-jun. Not at a party, not across a crowded room. It was in a boardroom in Singapore, a 3-day summit on cross-border investment corridors. And he was seated 2 chairs to her left, watching her dismantle a flawed financial model with the quiet appreciation of a man who respected precision above everything else. When the session broke, he crossed the room and said without introduction, "You were the only person in there who understood the real problem." She had looked at him and said, Most people don't want to." They had dinner, then another, then a dozen more in cities across 3 continents. And somewhere in those months of structured proximity, of shared silences over expensive meals and long conversations in airport lounges, she had mistaken respect for warmth, had mistaken his controlled attention for something deeper. He proposed in Seoul, formally, calmly, more like a negotiation than a declaration. "My family requires continuity," he told her. "A partner who is educated, credible, internationally visible. You are all of that, and I respect you more than any woman I have known." She was 31. She had been chasing a feeling she couldn't name for years. She told herself this was better than chasing. This was choosing. She said yes. And so Grace Amara became Grace Han. Well, what she understood about the Han family in the beginning, they were powerful, old money, new empire. The Han group controlled logistics, real estate, and a growing stake in K-beauty manufacturing. Seo-jun's father had built the foundation. Seo-jun had multiplied it. They were the kind of family whose name opened rooms. What she did not understand, what it cost to stay in those rooms. The family received her with the kind of courtesy that was impossible to complain about. They smiled. They used formal language. They complimented her Korean, which was already fluent by the wedding, and praised her poise at every corporate dinner she attended on Seojun's arm. His mother, Madame Han Yeon-suk, held both her hands at the reception and said, "You carry yourself beautifully." She had glowed at that. It took her 8 months inside the house to understand what Madame Han had actually said. Not, "You are beautiful. You carry yourself," as in, "You perform well," as in, "You are useful in the way a well-dressed room is useful," as in, "We chose correctly." She was not embraced. She was tolerated. And she had poured everything she had, her intelligence, her discipline, her grief, her loneliness, into making herself indispensable. She learned the family's business structures. She hosted dinners that made Seo-jun look like a global visionary. She gave them an air. She gave them Kofi. And for a while, she told herself that was enough. If you're already feeling this story, drop a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss what happens next. We're just getting started. The first year of the marriage was the easiest. Not because it was warm, but because Grace was still learning the rules. And learning gave her something to do with her hands. She studied Korean with the same intensity she had once applied to financial modeling. 4 hours a day, a private tutor who came to the house every morning before Seo-jun woke up. By the end of 6 months, she could hold a full conversation. By the end of the year, she was dreaming in it. Seo-jun noticed. He didn't praise her. He simply stopped using the English interpreter at family dinners, which she understood was the highest compliment available to her in that house. She took it. She took everything she could get. The Han estate sat in the hills above Seongbuk-dong, a compound of clean architectural lines, manicured gardens, and a silence so deliberate it felt designed. Staff moved through the house like water around stones. Meals appeared, cars arrived, schedules were maintained with the precision of a military operation. Grace fit herself into it. She learned which topics Madame Han liked at the dinner table. Traditional medicine, the family's philanthropic portfolio, the correct way to speak about Seo-jun's father as though he were still alive in the room. She learned which staff members to trust and which ones reported directly to the matriarch. She learned that in the Han house, a woman's power was measured not in what she said, but in what she knew and chose not to say. So she watched, and she learned, and she stored everything. At the charity galas, she was flawless. She wore the right designers. Korean always. Unless a European house was being courted for a partnership, in which case she wore them first. She smiled at the right people and deferred to the right women. She spoke 3 languages in a single evening without drawing attention to the fact that she was doing it. The press photographed her beside Seo-jun and called her elegant. A columnist for a Seoul lifestyle magazine described her as the Han family's most refined acquisition. She had read that and set the magazine down very carefully. Acquisition. She had told herself it didn't matter, that they would come to see her differently, that time and performance would convert tolerance into acceptance. She had been wrong about that, but she wouldn't know it yet for another 2 years. At home, her relationship with Seo-jun operated on a frequency she had taught herself to accept. When he was not cruel, he was not affectionate. He was consistent, present at the correct dinners, available for the correct public appearances, and absent in every way that mattered privately. They shared a bedroom that looked like a hotel suite. Clean surfaces, no clutter, separate schedules. Some nights he came to bed after midnight, smelling of whiskey and the specific exhaustion of a man who had been performing all day. He would lie on his side of the vast mattress and be asleep in minutes. She would lie on hers and stare at the ceiling. She had stopped asking him how his day was after the first year. Not because he was hostile about it, because he would answer in 4 words or fewer, and the silence that followed felt worse than not asking at all. What they had instead of intimacy was Kofi. Her son was born 18 months into the marriage, and from the moment Grace held him, something inside her that had been very tightly wound came slightly loose. He was small and furious and perfect. He had her eyes and Seo-jun's jaw, and a scream that could shake the windows. A healthy heir, Madame Han had said at the hospital, looking at the baby with something close to satisfaction. Grace had looked at Madame Han over the top of her son's head and felt for the first time the precise shape of what she was to this family. Functional, but Kofi was hers. Entirely, completely hers. She read to him every night in 3 languages, English, Yoruba, Korean, rotating them without pattern so that all 3 settled into him equally, like roots. She taught him to say good morning to the house staff by name. She sat with him through his piano lessons, even when he was terrible at them, which was for a long time. Seo Jun observed his son with the careful attention of a man evaluating an investment. He attended the school performances. He signed the documents. He was not absent. But there was a pane of glass between him and the boy that Grace could never figure out how to remove. She stopped trying after a while. Kofi didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he had already learned, the way children of complicated households learn early to navigate around the silence. He was perceptive, careful. He had his mother's instincts. She was proud of that and afraid of it at the same time. The second year bled into the third into the fourth. Grace Han became a recognizable figure in Seoul's elite circles. Not famous, but known. And the kind of woman who was always in the right room, whose presence raised the temperature of credibility at any event she attended. She had made herself necessary. She had made herself untouchable. Or so she believed. If this story is pulling you in, hit that like button and subscribe. We drop new stories every week, and you do not want to miss where this one goes. Drop a comment telling us what you think of Grace so far. The unease began on a Tuesday. Grace remembered it specifically because she had been reviewing the quarterly philanthropic report for Madame Han, a document she had taken on without being asked, because that was how she operated, when she heard Seo Jun's voice from the study down the hall. Low, careful. A register she hadn't heard before. She didn't move from her chair. She just listened. She couldn't make out words, only tone. And the tone was the kind a person uses when they are trying very hard not to be heard. Controlled on the surface, something pressurized underneath. He was on the phone for 11 minutes. She counted without meaning to. When he came out, he walked past the open door of the sitting room without looking in. His face was composed. His tie was straight. He looked exactly like himself. That was what unsettled her. She set the report down and sat with the feeling for a long moment. Then she picked it back up and finished the paragraph she'd been reading. She was good at that, at filing things away, continuing to function, returning to the sensation later when she had more information. She had learned that from him, actually. Over the next 3 weeks, she cataloged the changes the way she used to catalog discrepancies in financial data, quietly, without alerting anyone to what she was doing. Seojun began taking calls outside. Not always, just often enough. He started leaving for the office 20 minutes earlier than usual. No explanation. He didn't know her, one. That had always been the architecture of their marriage. But the shift was new, and newness in a man like Seojun meant something. The staff changed too, subtly. Mrs. Bay, the head housekeeper who had been with the family for 9 years, and had always given Grace a particular warmth, a co-conspirator's warmth, the kind that passes between women who understand each other's position, became formal. Correct. Her eyes stopped landing on Grace's directly. Grace noticed. She said nothing. At dinner one evening, she watched Seojun across the table, Kofi between them, chattering about something that had happened at school, a story involving a frog and his classmate, Junho. And she studied her husband's face the way she used to study balance sheets, looking for the line that didn't add up. He caught her looking. What? He said. Nothing, she said. Kofi, finish the story. Kofi finished the story. Seo Jun smiled at the appropriate moment. The dinner concluded, and the evening closed the way all their evenings closed, efficiently, without incident, without warmth. But that night, lying in the dark on her side of the bed, Grace ran through everything she knew, the calls, the distance, which had always been present but was now a different quality of distance, loaded rather than empty. Mrs. Bay's eyes, the way the air in the house had shifted, almost imperceptibly, like pressure before rain. She had survived 4 years in this house by reading the room better than anyone in it. The room was telling her something. She just didn't want to hear it yet. She threw herself into work. The philanthropic portfolio, a proposal she'd been drafting for a Han Group community initiative that she knew, if presented correctly, could expand the family's international credibility significantly. She worked on it at the desk in the corner of their bedroom while Seo-jun slept, her laptop screen bright in the dark room, her mind moving fast and clean the way it always did when she gave it a problem worth solving. She presented it to him over breakfast one morning, slid the proposal across the table with her coffee cup still in hand. He read the executive summary, turned a page, read further. "This is good," he said finally. "I know," she said. Something passed across his face. Not quite guilt, not quite admiration. Something in between that she couldn't name and didn't chase. "I'll pass it to the board," he said. She nodded and picked up her coffee. That was the last real conversation they had before everything broke. If you're feeling Grace's tension right now, you're exactly where you should be. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you're notified the moment we post. Comment below. Do you think Grace already knows? The woman arrived on a Friday afternoon. Grace was upstairs with Kofi, helping him through a Korean reading exercise. He was stubborn about the longer syllable blocks, always trying to rush. When she heard the front gate intercom, a pause, then voices at the entrance below. She didn't think much of it. Visitors came. Staff handled them. But then Mrs. Bai came upstairs, and she stood in the doorway of Kofi's room with an expression Grace had never seen on her before. Not quite discomfort. Something more than that. A woman standing at the edge of something she had been told to do and didn't want to. "Ma'am," she said, "there is someone at the door. Mr. Han asked that she be brought to the main reception room." Grace looked at her. "Mr. Han is in the office. He is on his way back." The way Mrs. Bai said it. Oh, the way her eyes held Grace's for exactly 1 second and then moved away. Grace felt something cold move through her chest. "Take Kofi to the playroom," Grace said. "Oma," Kofi started. "I'll come find you," Grace said. "Go with Mrs. Bai." She smoothed her blouse, walked downstairs. The woman in the reception room was standing at the window with her back to the door. She was Korean, mid-30s, dressed in a pale gray coat that had the quiet expense of something chosen carefully. Her posture was straight. Still, the posture of someone who had rehearsed being somewhere difficult. She turned when Grace entered. They looked at each other. The woman was beautiful. That landed first before everything else, and Grace hated herself for noticing. She was the kind of beautiful that required nothing. No performance, and no effort. The kind that simply existed and let everything arrange itself around it. She had a boy with her. The child had been sitting quietly on the edge of the reception couch. Grace hadn't seen him when she walked in. He stood when the woman turned, instinctively, the way a child stands when adults enter a room and the air changes. He was 5, maybe 6. Dark-haired, sharp features. Grace looked at the boy's face. The cold thing in her chest moved again, settled, became something else, something very still. "I'm Yoon Ji-yoon," the woman said. Her voice was even, prepared. "I think you know why I'm here." "I don't," Grace said. "So you should tell me." Ji-yoon looked at her steadily. "This is Seo-jun's son." The room did not change. The light coming through the windows was exactly the same. The clock on the mantel continued its small, mechanical ticking. Everything held its position. Grace looked at the boy again. She could see it now. She hadn't wanted to see it when she walked in. But standing here, in the clean afternoon light of a room she had decorated herself, had chosen every piece of furniture in, had hung every painting, she could see it plainly. The jaw, the set of the eyes, the particular stillness. She knew that stillness. She had watched it across a dinner table for 4 years. "How old is he?" Grace said. 5, Ji-yoon said. "His name is Seo-yul." "How long?" Ji-yoon paused. "Seo-jun and I were together before your marriage. We ended when it was decided he would marry someone else." She stopped, then more quietly. "We were not entirely ended." Grace's hands were at her sides. She became aware of them and made a conscious decision not to move them, not to cross her arms, not to press them together, to simply stand with them at her sides and breathe. Why are you here now? Grace said. Because Seo Yul deserves what is his, Ji-yoon said. I didn't come to destroy anything. I came because it's time. Time, Grace repeated. The front door opened. Seo Jun walked in. He stopped in the entrance of the reception room. He looked at Ji-yoon, at the boy, then at Grace. His face did what it always did. It composed itself. In under 2 seconds, whatever he had felt when he walked through that door was gone, replaced with the flat, controlled surface she had learned to read and had never fully been able to see beneath. But she saw beneath it now, because she was looking for something specific. And what she found was not guilt exactly, not the guilt of a man caught. It was something worse. It was the guilt of a man who had already decided. Grace, he said. Don't, she said quietly. The room held the three of them. The clock kept ticking. If this story has you gripped, smash that like button and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, did Seo Jun already know she was coming? Nobody spoke first. That was what Grace remembered afterward. The specific texture of that silence. The four of them standing in the reception room she had designed, in the house she had run for 4 years, and nobody moving, nobody filling the space with words. Then Kofi appeared in the doorway. He had slipped away from Mrs. Bay. He was good at that, always had been. And he stood in his socks at the threshold of the room, looking from his mother to his father, to the strange woman, to the boy he didn't know. Children read rooms faster than adults pretend they do. Oma, Kofi said carefully. Who is that? Grace crossed to him in 4 steps. She turned him gently by the shoulders, back toward the hallway and crouched to his level. Go with Mrs. Bay, she said quietly. I will come to you, I promise. He searched her face. But she kept it steady for him. She had practice at that. Okay, he said. She watched him go. Then she stood, turned back to the room, and looked at her husband. Everyone leaves except you, she said. Ji-yeon gathered Seo Yul without a word and moved into the hallway. The front door opened and closed. The house settled back into its silence. Grace and Seo Jun stood 10 feet apart in the room. How long, she said. Grace? How long, Seo Jun? He looked at her with that face, that composed, impenetrable face she had spent 4 years trying to reach through. Ji-yeon and I have a complicated history. I'm not asking about your history. I'm asking about my marriage. A pause. There were periods. It was not continuous. Periods, she repeated. The words sat in the air between them like something physical. The boy is mine, he said. And I won't pretend otherwise. The family needs to know. It is better that it comes from us than from us, Grace said. He stopped. You keep saying us, she said, like this is something we are navigating together. She looked at him steadily. Is it? He didn't answer immediately, and in that pause, that 3-second pause that he would probably not even remember giving, Grace understood everything. I see, she said. There are considerations, he said. The board, my mother, the succession structure. Seo Yul's position needs to be formalized, and that process will require... I want you to stop talking, Grace said. He stopped. She walked to the window, looked out at the garden. The Japanese maple she had planted the first spring, now tall and full. The stone path she had redesigned. The bench where she used to sit with Kofi on weekend mornings. Does your mother know? She said. She has been informed. When? Another pause, longer this time. 3 weeks ago. Grace closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. 3 weeks. Mrs. Bay's changed manner. The early morning departures. The phone calls behind closed doors. The entire household had known before her. She had been the last person in her own home to be told. She turned from the window. I want to speak to your mother tonight. Grace, I don't think that's... Tonight, Seo Jun. Madame Han Yun-suk received her in the formal sitting room of the East Wing, the room she used for people she wanted to remind of their position. It was furnished with deliberate antiquity, scroll paintings, a lacquered table, chairs that were beautiful and uncomfortable in equal measure. Grace sat in one of them and did not shift. Madame Han poured tea herself, which was either a gesture of intimacy or a performance of it. Grace had stopped being able to tell the difference years ago. You knew, Grace said. I was informed, Madame Han said carefully, setting the teapot down. as was my responsibility. Your responsibility, Grace said. And what is my responsibility in all of this? Madame Han looked at her with the expression Grace had catalogued early in the marriage. Not unkind, not cruel, simply the expression of a woman who had made a decision long ago and had no interest in revisiting it. You are Kofi's mother, Madame Han said. That does not change. And what else am I? A pause. You have been a credit to this family. Have been, Grace said. Madame Han lifted her tea. Grace understood then, completely, so without ambiguity, that this conversation had already been had without her, that positions had already been assigned, that the machinery of the Han family had already begun its quiet, efficient work of managing this situation, and the management plan did not include her in any role that mattered. She was not being divorced. She was being archived. The gossip moved through Seoul's elite circles the way all gossip did. Fast, precise, and dressed up as concern. By the following week, Grace felt it at every event. The half-second delay before women greeted her. The conversations that stopped when she approached. The particular social cruelty of people who had never fully accepted her, now feeling entirely justified in their original assessment. She heard it framed 3 different ways within 10 days. That the Han heir was not the only Han heir. That the foreign wife had perhaps not held the family's interest sufficiently. That Seo Jun's first loyalty was, as it should be, to Korean blood. She heard all of it, absorbed all of it. And then one evening, Kofi found her in her sitting room and climbed into the chair beside her and leaned his head against her arm and said very quietly, Oma, are we leaving? She looked down at her son. She thought about the 4 years, the language, the dinners, the proposals she had written, the garden, the silence, the bed, the life she had assembled from whatever materials the Han family had been willing to offer. No, she said. She pulled him close. Nobody is making us leave anything. If Grace just broke your heart a little, good. That means it's working. Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Would you have walked out or stayed and fought? We want to know. She was wrong about that, not immediately. But within 2 weeks, the house began to make itself inhospitable in ways that were impossible to name directly and impossible to ignore. Her access to the household accounts was quietly redirected. She discovered this when a payment for Kofi's tutoring was declined, and she was informed politely by the family's financial manager that expenditures above a certain threshold now required Seo Jun's co-authorization. Her calendar, the shared family calendar she had maintained for 4 years, managing Seo Jun's public schedule alongside her own, was removed from her devices without explanation. When she asked the family's personal assistant about it, the woman looked at her screen and said, I believe, mister. One Han's office is managing that directly now. Her name was taken off the guest list for the Han Group's annual stakeholder dinner. She found out from a journalist who called to confirm whether she would be attending. Each of these things individually was explainable. Together they were a sentence. She brought it to Seo Jun directly on a Wednesday evening when Kofi was in bed and the house was quiet. She found him in the study and she closed the door and she stood in front of his desk and she said, Tell me what is happening. He looked up from his laptop. He was wearing his glasses, reading glasses he rarely wore in front of people. And for a moment, in the lamplight, he looked almost human, almost like the man in the Singapore boardroom who had crossed the room to say something true to her. There is a restructuring, he said, of responsibilities given the current situation, Grace said. Your word for what you did. He removed his glasses, set them on the desk. There are things in motion that I cannot slow down, he said. The board has concerns. My mother has concerns. Seo Yul's formalization into the family structure raises questions about the existing succession. Kofi's succession, Grace said. Say his name. Kofi's position is not under threat, Seo Jun said. He is my legitimate heir. That is established. And what am I? Grace said. Still? The silence that followed was the longest he had ever given her. She watched him in it, watched him choose, in real time, between several versions of an answer. And she saw with perfect clarity that none of the versions he was considering were the truth. You will be taken care of, he said. Arrangements will be taken care of, Grace said softly. Grace. Like a problem, she said. You'll take care of me like a problem. He stood up. That is not what I... You let your mother know before you told me, Grace said. You let the entire household know. You restructured my access to my own home before you had a single honest conversation with me. Her voice was level, completely level. She had decided sometime in the last 2 weeks that she would not cry in front of him again. I have given this family 4 years and a son and my complete, absolute, uninterrupted competence, and you are going to take care of me. He looked at her across the desk. I am sorry, he said. It was the most honest thing he had said to her in years, and it was the most useless. She left the study. 3 days later, a lawyer called. He was Han family retained. She knew his firm, had seen the letterhead on estate documents, and he was professionally gentle in the way that lawyers are when they have been briefed on how to handle a difficult party. He spoke about a transition agreement, about a residential arrangement, about Kofi's custody structure, primary care with Grace, generous visitation, schooling to continue uninterrupted, about a figure, a number with enough zeros that a woman with less clarity might have felt grateful. Grace listened to all of it. Then she said, I'll need my own legal representation before I respond to any of this. The lawyer said, of course, naturally, take all the time needed. She hung up and sat with the phone in her hand in a room that was still, technically, hers. She looked around it, and at the furniture she had chosen, the art she had selected, the bookshelves she had filled, the view of the garden through the tall windows, her maple, her path, her bench. All of it had the quality, suddenly, of a stage set. Beautiful, functional, constructed. A room designed to look like a life. 2 days after that, she was asked, gently through Mrs. Bay, which was its own kind of cruelty, whether she might find it more comfortable to stay in the guest residence on the east side of the property while the main house underwent some internal reorganization. She packed a bag for herself and Kofi. She walked through the main entrance of the Han estate, the entrance she had walked through hundreds of times, as wife, as hostess, even as the woman who held this household together with her bare hands, and she heard the heavy doors close behind her. She stood on the stone steps in the evening air. Kofi's hand found hers. She looked down at him, at his face, her eyes, Seojun's jaw, and something entirely his own that she had been growing in him since the day he arrived. She thought about every silence she had swallowed, every room she had read and performed for, every version of herself she had compressed to fit inside this family's idea of what she should be. They had mistaken her silence for weakness. That was going to cost them. Come on, she said to Kofi. She picked up the bag. She walked. The woman who walked away from that house was the last quiet version of Grace Amara that anyone would ever see. Or subscribe and hit the bell right now, because what she does next is what this whole story has been building toward. Like this video and drop a comment. What do you think her first move will be? She did not fall apart. That was the first thing people would have expected. The quiet foreign wife, stripped of her title and her house, crumbling under the weight of it. Retreating to an embassy or a flight back to Lagos, or the arms of some sympathetic friend who would tell her she was better off out of it. Grace did none of those things. She rented a serviced apartment in Mapogu, clean, modern, anonymous, and she enrolled Kofi in his school for the following term under her name only. She hired a lawyer, not the kind the Han family would have expected her to hire, not a divorce specialist, not a family court practitioner, but a corporate litigator named Park Ji-won, who had a reputation in Seoul's legal community for being, as one profile had described her, structurally merciless. They met in Ji-won's office on a gray Monday morning. Grace arrived 10 minutes early, sat in the reception with her coat in her lap, and when Ji-won came out to greet her, she stood and said, before anything else, I don't want sympathy, I want strategy. Ji-won looked at her for a moment. Then she smiled. Small, precise. Then you came to the right place. Grace sat across from her and began to talk. She had been inside the Han Group's operational structure for 4 years. She had attended board dinners. She had read documents that passed through the household, not because she had gone looking for them, but because she was the kind of woman who read everything placed in front of her and remembered all of it. So she had heard conversations she was not meant to hear and had filed them away with the same discipline she applied to everything else. She had not known, when she was collecting all of it, that she was building leverage. But she had been. Ji-won listened without interrupting. She took notes in a small leather notebook with the focused economy of someone who already knew which details mattered. When Grace finished, Ji-won set down her pen and was quiet for a moment. "The succession question is your strongest position," she said. "Kofi's legitimacy versus Seo Yule's formalization. The board will not want that litigated publicly. It creates exactly the kind of instability that affects share price and partner confidence." "I know," Grace said. "And the restructuring of your household access before any legal separation was filed. That's aggressive and potentially actionable." "I know that too." Ji-won studied her. "What do you want out of this? Be specific." Grace looked at her. "I want Kofi's inheritance protected, in writing, irrevocably. I want my role in the Han Group's international philanthropic portfolio formalized as an independent position, not as the CEO's wife, as a principal. And I want the board to understand that any attempt to manage this situation quietly depends entirely on my cooperation. And if they don't cooperate, then I stop being cooperative," Grace said. "And everything I know about the Han Group's internal structure becomes relevant to people who would find it very interesting." Ji-won picked up her pen again. "All right," she said. "Hey, let's build this." The weeks that followed were the sharpest of Grace's life. She moved differently now, not with the careful, calibrated elegance of a woman performing for a room, but with the contained energy of a woman who had stopped performing entirely and was operating on pure intention. She slept less but rested more deeply. She ate with the focused practicality of someone fueling a machine. She called her mother in Lagos for the first time in months and talked for 2 hours. Not about the Han family, not about the marriage, but about everything before all of it. Her mother listened and then said, in Yoruba, the thing she had always said when Grace was a girl facing something difficult. "You know who you are. Act like it." She acted like it. She began reaching out, carefully and strategically, to contacts she had built over 4 years of Han Group events. International partners, NGO directors, journalists who covered corporate philanthropy in Asia. Not to say anything. Not yet. Simply to remind them that she existed, that she was active, that Grace Amara, was a name still worth noting. The responses came back warm, warmer than she expected. It turned out that a significant number of people who had worked with her through the Han Group's charitable initiatives had been working with her. Not with the Han name. They had valued her specifically. Her intelligence, her follow-through, her ability to move between worlds without losing herself in any of them. She had built something inside that marriage without fully realizing it. They had tried to archive her. What they had actually done was give her time to remember what she was worth. Kofi adapted with the resilience of a child who had his mother's instincts. He asked fewer questions than Grace expected and observed more. He was quieter in the new apartment at first, then gradually, incrementally, more himself, spreading his books across the sitting room floor, losing his shoes in every room, talking at dinner with the unsuppressed enthusiasm that the Han household's formality had always slightly dampened. One evening he looked up from his homework and said, "Oma, I like it here." She looked at him across the table. "Yeah?" she said. "It feels like ours," he said simply, and looked back down at his page. She held that sentence for a long time after he went to bed. Hanadorath, the Han Group's annual stakeholder dinner, was held on a Thursday evening in November at a hotel in Yeonggu. The same hotel, the same ballroom, the same architecture of power Grace had navigated for 4 years on Seo-jun's arm. She arrived alone. She was dressed in black, a structured, floor-length column of it, no embellishment, no concession. Her hair was up. Her posture was the posture of a woman who had decided, somewhere between the apartment in Mapogu and this entrance, that the version of herself that apologized for taking up space was finished. She handed her coat to the attendant and walked into the room. The shift was immediate, and she felt it without looking for it. The quality of attention that moves through a crowd when something unexpected enters. Heads turning, conversations pausing in the middle of sentences. Or the particular social electricity of a room recalibrating. She took a glass from a passing tray and moved through the space with the ease of a woman returning to somewhere she had never left. She heard her name twice, spoken in low voices behind her. She did not turn around. Across the room, she saw Seo Jun. He was standing with two board members and a partner from their Japanese logistics division. A configuration she recognized, a conversation she had facilitated herself 18 months ago. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. His face did what it always did. But this time, underneath the composure, she saw something she had never seen there before. He was afraid. Good, she thought. She turned away from him and moved toward a group of international partners she had worked with on the Foundation's East Africa initiative. People who had emailed her personally over the past weeks, who had responded to her re-emergence with the warmth of colleagues who had wondered where she went. They received her with open hands and genuine smiles. She stepped into the circle. The whispers moved through the room like a current. She's back. She came back. She lifted her glass slightly and let the conversation carry her forward. Fluent, precise, completely herself. And she thought of the rain outside the Gangnam Tower, of Kofi's hand in hers, of every door that had been closed quietly in her face, of every silence she had swallowed to keep a peace that was never really peace at all. They had erased her name. They had forgotten who carried their legacy. Grace Amara, from the rain outside the tower to the center of the room where it all began. If this story hit the way it was supposed to, please like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to see a woman rebuild herself from nothing.